To Sir Watkin Phillips, of Jesus College, Oxondear, I think those people are unreasonable, who complain that Bath is a contracted circle, in which the same dull scenes perpetually revolve, without variation. I am, on the contrary, amazed to find so small a place so crowded with entertainment and variety. London itself can hardly exhibit one species of diversion, to which we have not something analogous at Bath, over and above those singular advantages that are peculiar to the place. Here, for example, a man has daily opportunities of seeing the most remarkable characters of the community. He sees them in their natural attitudes and true colors, descended from their pedestals, and divested of their formal draperies, undisguised by art and affectation. Here we have ministers of state, judges, generals, bishops, projectors, philosophers, wits, poets, players, chemists, fiddlers, and buffoons. If he makes any considerable stay in the place, he is sure of meeting with some particular friend, whom he did not expect to see, and to me there is nothing more agreeable than such casual re-encounters. Another entertainment, peculiar to Bath, arises from the general mixture of all degrees assembled in our public rooms, without distinction of rank or fortune. This is what my uncle reprobates, as a monstrous jumble of heterogeneous principles, a vile mob of noise and impertinence, without decency or subordination. But this chaos is to me a source of infinite amusement. I was extremely diverted last ball night to see the master of the ceremonies leading, with great solemnity, to the upper end of the room, an antiquated Abigail, dressed in her lady's cast clothes, whom he, I suppose, mistook for some countess just arrived at the Bath. The ball was opened by a Scotch lord, with a mulatto heiress from St. Christopher's, and the gay Colonel Tinsel danced all the evening with the daughter of an eminent tinman from the borough of Southwark. Yesterday morning, at the pump room, I saw a broken-winded whopping landlady squeeze through a circle of peers, to salute her brandy merchant, who stood by the window, propped upon crutches, and a paralytic attorney of Shoe Lane, in shuffling up to the bar, kicked the shins of the Chancellor of England, while his lordship, in a cut bob, drank a glass of water at the pump. I cannot account for my being pleased with these incidents any other way than by saying they are truly ridiculous in their own nature, and serve to heighten the humor and the farce of life, which I am determined to enjoy as long as I can. Those follies, that move my uncle's spleen, excite my laughter. He is as tender as a man without a skin, who cannot bear the slightest touch without flinching. What tickles another would give him torment, and yet he has what we may call lucid intervals, when he is remarkably facetious. Indeed, I never knew a hypochondriac so apt to be infected with good humor. He is the most risible misanthrope I ever met with. A lucky joke, or any ludicrous incident, will set him a-laughing immoderately, even in one of his most gloomy paroxysms, and, when the laugh is over, he will curse his own imbecility. In conversing with strangers, he betrays no marks of disquiet. He is splenetic with his familiars only, and not even with them, while they keep his attention employed, but when his spirits are not exerted externally, they seem to recoil and prey upon himself. He has renounced the waters with execration, but he begins to find a more efficacious, and, certainly, a much more palatable remedy in the pleasures of society. He has discovered some old friends, among the invalids of Bath, and, in particular, renewed his acquaintance with the celebrated James Quin, who certainly did not come here to drink water. You cannot doubt but that I had the strongest curiosity to know this original, and it was gratified by Mr. Bramble, who has had him twice at our house to dinner. So far as I am able to judge, Quin's character is rather more respectable than it has been generally represented. His bon mots are in every witling's mouth, but many of them have a rank flavor, which one would be apt to think was derived from a natural grossness of idea. I suspect, however, that justice has not been done the author by the collectors of those Quiniana, who have let the best of them slip through their fingers, and only retained such as were suited to the taste and organs of the multitude. How far he may relax in his hours of jollity, I cannot pretend to say, but his general conversation is conducted by the nicest rules of propriety, and Mr. James Quin is, certainly, one of the best-bred men in the kingdom. He is not only a most agreeable companion, but, as I am credibly informed, a very honest man, highly susceptible of friendship, warm, steady, and even generous in his attachments, disdaining flattery, and incapable of meanness and dissimulation. Were I to judge, however, from Quin's eye alone, I should take him to be proud, insolent, and cruel. There is something remarkably severe and forbidding in his aspect, and, I have been told, he was ever disposed to insult his inferiors and dependents. Perhaps that report has influenced my opinion of his looks. You know we are the fools of prejudice. Howsoever that may be, I have as yet seen nothing but his favorable side, and my uncle, who frequently confers with him, in a corner, declares he is one of the most sensible men he ever knew. He seems to have a reciprocal regard for old Square-Toes, whom he calls by the familiar name of Matthew, and often reminds of their old tavern adventures. On the other hand, Matthew's eyes sparkle whenever Quin makes his appearance. Let him be never so jarring and discordant, Quin puts him in tune, and, like treble and bass in the same concert, they make excellent music together. T'other day, the conversation turning upon Shakespeare, I could not help saying, with some emotion, that I would give 100 guineas to see Mr. Quin act the part of Falstaff, upon which, turning to me with a smile, and I would give 1,000, young gentleman, said he, that I could gratify your longing. My uncle and he are perfectly agreed in their estimate of life, which Quin says would stink in his nostrils if he did not steep it in claret. I want to see this phenomenon in his cups, and have almost prevailed upon uncle to give him a small turtle at the Bear. In the meantime, I must entertain you with an incident that seems to confirm the judgment of those two cynic philosophers. I took the liberty to differ in opinion from Mr. Bramble when he observed that the mixture of people in the entertainments of this place was destructive of all order and urbanity, that it rendered the plebeians insufferably arrogant and troublesome, and vulgarized the deportment and sentiments of those who moved in the upper spheres of life. He said such a preposterous coalition would bring us into contempt with all our neighbors, and was worse, in fact, than debasing the gold coin of the nation. I argued, on the contrary, that those plebeians who discovered such eagerness to imitate the dress and equipage of their superiors, would likewise, in time, adopt their maxims and their manners, be polished by their conversation, and refined by their example. But when I appealed to Mr. Quin, and asked if he did not think that such an unreserved mixture would improve the whole mass? Yes, said he, as a plate of marmalade would improve a pan of Sir Reverence. I owned I was not much conversant in high life, but I had seen what were called polite assemblies in London and elsewhere, that those of Bath seemed to be as decent as any, and that, upon the whole, the individuals that composed it would not be found deficient in good manners and decorum. But let us have recourse to experience, said I. Jack Holder, who was intended for a parson, has succeeded to an estate of 2,000 a year, by the death of his elder brother. He is now at the Bath, driving about in a phaeton and four, with French horns. He is treated with turtle and claret at all the taverns in Bath and Bristol, till his guests are gorged with good cheer. He has bought 12 suits of fine clothes, by the advice of the master of the ceremonies, under whose tuition he has entered himself. He has lost hundreds at billiards to sharpers, and taken one of the nymphs of Avon Street into keeping, but, finding all these channels insufficient to drain him of his current cash, his counsellor has engaged him to give a general tea-drinking tomorrow at Wiltshire's room. In order to give it the more éclat, every table is to be furnished with sweetmeats and nosegays, which, however, are not to be touched till notice is given by the ringing of a bell, and then the ladies may help themselves without restriction. This will be no bad way of trying the company's breeding. I will abide by that experiment, cried my uncle, and if I could find a place to stand secure, without the vortex of the tumult, which I know will ensue, I would certainly go thither and enjoy the scene. Quin proposed that we should take our station in the music gallery, and we took his advice. Holder had got thither before us, with his horns perdue, but we were admitted. The tea-drinking passed as usual, and the company having risen from the tables, were sauntering in groups, in expectation of the signal for attack. When the bell beginning to ring, they flew with eagerness to the dessert, and the whole place was instantly in commotion. There was nothing but justling, scrambling, pulling, snatching, struggling, scolding, and screaming. The nosegays were torn from one another's hands and bosoms, the glasses and china went to wreck, the tables and floors were strewed with comfits. Some cried, some swore, and the tropes and figures of Billingsgate were used without reserve in all their native zest and flavour, nor were those flowers of rhetoric unattended with significant gesticulation. Some snapped their fingers, some forked them out, some clapped their hands, and some their backsides. At length, they fairly proceeded to pulling caps, and everything seemed to presage a general battle, when Holder ordered his horns to sound a charge, with a view to animate the combatants and inflame the contest, but this maneuver produced an effect quite contrary to what he expected. It was a note of reproach that roused them to an immediate sense of their disgraceful situation. They were ashamed of their absurd deportment, and suddenly desisted. They gathered up their caps, ruffles, and handkerchiefs, and great part of them retired in silent mortification. Quinn laughed at this adventure, but my uncle's delicacy was hurt. He hung his head in manifest chagrin, and seemed to repine at the triumph of his judgment. Indeed, his victory was more complete than he imagined, for, as we afterwards learned, the two Amazons who singularized themselves most in the action did not come from the purlieus of Puddledock, but from the courtly neighborhood of St. James's Palace. One was a baroness, and the other, a wealthy knight's dowager. My uncle spoke not a word, till we had made our retreat good to the coffee-house, where, taking off his hat and wiping his forehead, "I bless God," said he, "that Mrs. Tabitha Bramble did not take the field today." "I would pit her for a cool 100, cried Quinn, "against the best shake-bag of the whole main. The truth is, nothing could have kept her at home but the accident of her having taken physic before she knew the nature of the entertainment. She has been for some days furbishing up an old suit of black velvet, to make her appearance as Sir Ulick's partner at the next ball. I have much to say of this amiable kinswoman, but she has not been properly introduced to your acquaintance. She is remarkably civil to Mr. Quinn, of whose sarcastic humor she seems to stand in awe, but her caution is no match for her impertinence. Mr. Gwyn, said she the other day, I was once vastly entertained with your playing the Ghost of Gimlet at Drury Lane, when you rose up through the stage, with a white face and red eyes, and spoke of quails upon the frightful porcupine. Do, pray, spout a little the Ghost of Gimlet. Madam, said Quinn, with a glance of ineffable disdain, the Ghost of Gimlet is laid, never to rise again. Insensible of this check, she proceeded, well, to be sure, you looked and talked so like a real ghost, and then the cock crowed so natural. I wonder how you could teach him to crow so exact, in the very nick of time, but, I suppose, he's game, anti-game, Mr. Gwyn? Dunhill, madam. Well, Dunhill, or not Dunhill, he has got such a clear countertenor, that I wish I had such another at Brambleton Hall, to wake the maids of a morning. Do you know where I could find one of his brood? Probably in the workhouse at St. Giles's parish, madam, but I protest I know not his particular mew. My uncle, frying with vexation, cried, Good God, sister, how you talk! I have told you 20 times, that this gentleman's name is not Gwyn. Hoity-toity, brother mine, she replied, no offence, I hope. Gwyn is an honourable name, of true old British extraction. I thought the gentleman had been come of Mrs. Helen Gwyn, who is of his own profession, and if so be that were the case, he might be of King Charles's breed, and have royal blood in his veins. No, madam, answered Quinn, with great solemnity, my mother was not a whore of such distinction. True it is, I am sometimes tempted to believe myself of royal descent, for my inclinations are often arbitrary. If I was an absolute prince, at this instant, I believe I should send for the head of your cook in a charger. She has committed felony, on the person of that John Dory, which is mangled in a cruel manner, and even presented without sauce, o tempora! O mores! This good-humoured sally turned the conversation into a less disagreeable channel, but, lest you should think my scribble as tedious as Mrs. Tabby's clack, I shall not add another word, but that I am as usual yours, J. Melford, Bath, April 30th.